Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where the darkest corners of human history are laid bare. Tonight we bring you Volume 17 of our True Crime Stories for Sleep, a collection of chilling tales that unravel the twisted motives behind unthinkable acts. These are stories of betrayal, greed, and obsession, each one a haunting reminder that evil often wears a familiar face. Settle in, close your eyes, and let the rain guide you through 9 gripping cases. But be warned, once you step into the shadows, there's no turning back. Our journey begins in the sun-drenched streets of Mendoza, Argentina, where a woman's quiet life hid a venomous secret. This is the story of Karen Oviedo, the Gualan Poisoner. Part 1, the Gualan Poisoner. In the heart of Mendoza, Argentina, where the Andes cast their long shadows and vineyards stretch endlessly under the sun, the small town of Manidu seemed untouched by darkness. It was a place where neighbors waved from porches, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the laughter of children playing in the streets. But beneath this idyllic surface, a poison was brewing. Silent, insidious, and deadly. Karen Oviedo was no stranger to Manidu. At 32, she was a woman who blended effortlessly into the rhythm of the town. Her dark hair framed a face that could shift from warm to unreadable in a heartbeat. To those who knew her, she was a devoted wife to Rolando Angeleno, a hard-working man who ran a warehouse business with her by his side. Together, they seemed to embody the quiet ambition of small-town life. But appearances, as we know, can be lethal. In 2019, tragedy struck the Ano household. Rolando's 9-year-old son, Elias, a bright boy with a smile that could light up a room, fell gravely ill. His small body withered under a mysterious ailment, vomiting, seizures, and a weakness that no doctor could explain. The hospital in Mendoza became a second home for the family. As Elias fought for his life, Karen was there, always there, holding his hand, her face etched with grief. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something cold, something calculated that no one noticed at the time. Elias didn't make it. On a quiet night in July, his heart stopped, and the boy who loved soccer and dreamed of becoming a pilot was gone. The doctors were baffled. They called it an undiagnosed condition, a cruel twist of fate. Rolando was shattered, his grief a heavy cloak that never left his shoulders. Karen, too, wept at the funeral, her sobs echoing through the church. But in the shadows of her sorrow, questions began to stir. Why had Elias's symptoms appeared so suddenly? Why had no test, no scan, revealed the cause? The town whispered its sympathies, but a few, a neighbor here, a nurse there, felt an unease they couldn't name. They remembered Karen's insistence on preparing Elias's meals, her reluctance to let others near him in his final days. They remembered the way she'd linger in the hospital room, her hands always busy with something, a glass of juice, a syringe, a cloth. 3 years passed, and life in Manidu trudged on. Karen and Rolando continued their work, their marriage a quiet partnership forged in shared loss. But in 2022, the darkness returned. Rolando, a robust man in his late 30s, began to sicken. The symptoms were eerily familiar. Nausea, confusion, a body betraying itself. He was admitted to the same hospital where Elias had died, his condition deteriorating with terrifying speed. Karen was at his bedside, as always, her face a mask of concern. She brought him orange juice, his favorite, and sat with him through the long nights. But this time, the whispers grew louder. A nurse noticed Karen's odd behavior, how she'd hover over Rolando's IV line, how she'd dismiss offers of help with a sharpness that didn't match her usual calm. A neighbor recalled seeing Karen at a hardware store weeks earlier, purchasing antifreeze for a car she didn't own. And then there was the housekeeper, Maria, who'd worked for the Anos for years, that decided to lie to them. She told police she'd seen Karen crushing pills into Rolando's juice, her hands moving with a precision that chilled Maria to the bone. Rolando died on a sweltering afternoon in March 2022. The official cause was organ failure, but the hospital staff weren't convinced. The similarities to Elias's death were impossible to ignore. An autopsy was ordered, and what it revealed sent shockwaves through Manidu. Rolando's body was laced with ethylene glycol, a toxic chemical found in antifreeze. It was a poison that killed slowly, mimicking natural illness, leaving no obvious trace unless you knew to look for it. And when investigators exhumed Elias's body, they found the same deadly substance coursing through his remains. Karen Oviedo was no longer the grieving widow. She was a suspect. The police moved swiftly. descending on the Aino household with a warrant. What they found was a house of secrets. In a locked drawer, hidden beneath stacks of invoices, were vials of ethylene glycol, their labels faded but unmistakable. Karen's laptop told an even darker story. Her search history was a roadmap to murder, ethylene glycol symptoms, and undetectable poisons. She'd even searched for how long does antifreeze take to kill, the timestamp chillingly close to Elias's first symptoms. In the interrogation room, Karen was a study in contradictions. She wept, her voice trembling as she spoke of her love for Rolando and Elias. But when pressed, her story unraveled. She claimed that antifreeze was for their warehouse machinery, but no such equipment existed. She said Rolando had been suicidal, but friends and family painted a different picture. A man devoted to his work, still healing from his son's death, but determined to move forward. As for Elias, Karen had no explanation. Her tears dried up, replaced by a steely silence that spoke louder than words. The trial began in December 2022, and Manadoo held its breath. The prosecution painted a portrait of a woman consumed by a hidden rage, a master manipulator who'd poisoned her stepson and husband with chilling precision. They argued that Karen had laced their orange juice with ethylene glycol, watching as they suffered, knowing exactly what she'd done. The evidence was damning. Witness testimonies, the chemical vials, the digital trail. Maria, the housekeeper, took the stand, her voice shaking as she described Karen's cold efficiency, the way she'd smile at Rolando even as she handed him his tainted drink. But what drove her, the prosecution could only speculate. Some pointed to jealousy, Karen's strained relationship with Elias, a child from Rolando's previous marriage, who'd always been a reminder of a life before her. Others suggested financial motives, though the warehouse business was modest and no large insurance payout was found. There were whispers of an affair, a fleeting moment when Rolando had caught Karen with another man years earlier, a wound that never healed. The defense seized on this, portraying Karen as a battered wife driven to desperation by Rolando's alleged abuse. But the jury saw through the smoke and mirrors. There was no evidence of violence, only Karen's calculated cruelty. As the trial unfolded, Karen's facade crumbled. A neighbor testified about her strange detachment, how she'd laughed at a barbecue just days after Elias's death. A pharmacist recalled her asking about tasteless poisons, her questions too specific, too deliberate. The most haunting moment came when Elias's mother, Rolando's ex-wife, took the stand. Her voice broke as she described her son's final days, how he'd clung to Karen, trusting her even as she betrayed him. "She took my boy," she said, her words cutting through the courtroom. "And then she took the man I loved." The jury deliberated for less than a day. On a cold December morning, Karen Oviedo was found guilty of 2 counts of murder. The judge's voice was steady as he sentenced her to life in prison without parole, calling her actions a betrayal of the deepest kind. Karen showed no emotion, her eyes fixed on some distant point as she was led away in handcuffs. Manadoo, once a haven of trust, would never be the same. But the question lingers, like a shadow that refuses to fade. Why? What turned a woman who seemed so ordinary into a monster? Was it jealousy, greed, or something darker, something buried so deep even Karen couldn't name it? The answers are locked away with her, in a cell where the sun never reaches. As the rain falls outside, imagine the streets of Manadoo, now quiet, the laughter replaced by whispers. Karen Oviedo's story is a reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it pours you a glass of juice and smiles as you drink. Part 2, the Rolex Man Case. An English Channel is a restless beast, its waves churning secrets beneath a sky that never quite clears. In the summer of 1996, the waters off the coast of South England were restless, spitting foam against the hulls of fishing trawlers that bobbed in the dawn light. On July 28, one such vessel, the Migdale, hauled up its nets, expecting a catch of cod or mackerel. Instead, the crew froze. Tangled in the ropes was a body, bloated, decomposed, a grim relic of the sea. But it wasn't the corpse that caught their eye. On its wrist, glinting faintly in the morning sun, was a Rolex watch. Its hands frozen at a moment, lost to time. The discovery sent a shiver through the Devon and Cornwall police. A body in the channel wasn't unheard of. Accidental drowning and suicides, they happened. But this felt different. The Rolex, a Submariner model worth thousands, wasn't the kind of thing you wore for a midnight swim. Its date magnifier, stuck on July 20, suggested the man had been in the water for about a week. The body was male, middle-aged, dressed in faded jeans and a shirt that clung to his frame like a second skin. No wallet, no ID, just the watch and a faint tattoo on his arm, blurred by the sea's cruel embrace. The autopsy offered little at first. The man had drowned, his lungs heavy with salt water. There were no obvious signs of violence, no bullet wounds, no stab marks. The police labeled it a possible accident. But the Rolex nagged at them. It was a clue, a breadcrumb in a story that refused to stay buried. They sent the body to forensic experts who used dental records and the tattoo to identify the man, Ronald Platt, a 51-year-old Canadian-born TV repairman who'd lived a quiet life in Essex. But who was Ronald Platt and how had he ended up in the Channel's cold embrace? Ronald's story began far from England's shores. Born in Vancouver, he was a man of modest dreams, a tinkerer who loved fixing things from radios to relationships. In the 1980s, he moved to England with his partner Elaine Boyes, settling in a small flat in Woodford Green. They were an unremarkable couple, content with their routine of work and evenings at the pub. But in 1992, Ronald met a man who would change everything. David Davis. Anderson Davis was a charmer, a Canadian expat with a silver tongue and a knack for making friends. He was in his late 40s, with a polished demeanor that hinted at wealth and connections. To Ronald, he was a breath of fresh air, a worldly man who spoke of investments and opportunities. Davis claimed to be a financial consultant and purchase, and Ronald, trusting to a fault, handed over his bank details, his credit cards, even his identity. Davis promised to manage Ronald's modest savings to grow them into something substantial. Ronald, dazzled by the man's confidence, didn't hesitate. But David Davis wasn't who he seemed. His real name was Albert Johnson Walker, a fugitive from Canada wanted for embezzling millions from clients back in the 1970s. Walker was a con man of the highest order, a chameleon who slipped into lies and left ruin in his wake. He'd fled to England under a stolen identity, always one step ahead of the law. To him, Ronald Platt was more than a friend. He was a pawn, a mask to wear in a country where no one knew his face. By 1993, Ronald and Elaine were struggling. Their savings entrusted to Davis had vanished. Davis apologized profusely, claiming bad investments, but the damage was done. Ronald, heartbroken and broke, decided to return to Canada with Elaine, hoping for a fresh start. Before he left, he gave Davis a parting gift, his birth certificate and other personal documents, so Davis could sort out their affairs in England. It was a decision that would cost Ronald his life. Back in Canada, Ronald tried to rebuild. He found work repairing TVs, reconnected with old friends, and began to heal. But in 1996, he made a fateful choice. He missed England, the pubs, the green hills, the life he'd left behind. Against Elaine's protests, he returned to Essex, renting a small cottage in Little Baddow. He reached out to Davis, who'd stayed in touch through occasional letters. Davis welcomed him warmly, even offering to help him settle in. But there was a problem. Davis had been living as Ronald Platt. Walker had taken Ronald's identity wholesale, his name, his bank accounts, his life. In the quiet village of Little Baddow, he was Ronald Platt, respected businessman, living with a younger woman named Kim and their 2 children. The real Ronald's return was a threat, a crack in the facade that could expose Walker's lies. Ronald, oblivious, thought Davis was still his friend. He didn't know that every smile, every handshake was a step closer to his grave. On July 20th, 1996, Ronald told Elaine he was meeting Davis for a day out. Davis had invited him onto a yacht, a sleek vessel called the Lady Jane, for a cruise along the Devon coast. Ronald was thrilled. Boating wasn't his usual scene, but Davis made it sound like an adventure. They met at a marina, the sun high, the sea calm. Ronald climbed aboard, unaware that the yacht was a trap, its deck a stage for murder. What happened next is known only through fragments, pieced together by detectives who would later unravel Walker's web. Somewhere on the open water, far from prying eyes, Walker struck. He lured Ronald to the deck, perhaps with a drink or a story. Then, with a heavy anchor in hand, he delivered a blow to Ronald's head, knocking him unconscious. The sea was vast, indifferent. Walker tied the anchor to Ronald's belt, ensuring it would drag him to the depths. With a heave, He pushed Ronald overboard, watching as the waves swallowed him whole. The Rolex, still ticking on Ronald's wrist, was the only witness. Walker returned to shore, his face a mask of calm. He told Kim he'd dropped Ronald off at a pub, that he'd seemed fine. But Ronald didn't come home. Elaine, back in Canada, grew frantic when his calls stopped. She contacted Essex police, who began to dig. They interviewed neighbors, traced Ronald's last movements, and kept circling back to one name, David Davis. The investigation gained traction when forensic experts analyzed the anchor found near the Lady Jane's mooring. It bore traces of Ronald's hair and blood, faint but unmistakable. Divers searched the yacht itself, finding Ronald's fingerprints on a rail as if he'd gripped it in a moment of struggle. The police turned to Elaine, who provided a crucial lead. Davis's real name. She'd met him years ago, before the con, and remembered his Canadian accent, his two perfect stories. A cross-better call to Canadian authorities confirmed it. Albert Johnson Walker, wanted for fraud, was their man. But finding Walker wasn't easy. He was a ghost, slipping between identities like a shadow through fog. The police leaned on Kim, who was starting to question the man she lived with. She handed over documents, bank statements, letters, all in Ronald Platt's name, but signed with a flourish that wasn't his. Then came the breakthrough. Walker's daughter, Sheena, living in Canada. She'd grown up under her father's lies, but she was done protecting him. Sheena told investigators about his past, his scams, his ruthless ambition. She gave him a photo, a grainy image of a man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was enough. On August 15th, 1996, police raided Walker's home in Little Baddow. He was there, sipping tea as if the world had shifted beneath him. His charm faltered under the weight of handcuffs. In the interrogation room, Walker tried to spin a tale. Ronald had fallen overboard, an accident, a tragedy. But the evidence was a noose tightening around him. The anchor, the fingerprints, the stolen identity, it all pointed to one truth. Albert Johnson Walker was a killer. The trial began in 1998 at Chelmsford Crown Court, and it was a spectacle. Walker, now 52, sat in the dock, his polished exterior fraying. The prosecution laid out his life like a map of deceit. The millions stolen in Canada, the families ruined, the identities discarded like old coats. Ronald Platt, they said, was the final casualty of Walker's greed, killed to protect a lie. The anchor was the star witness, its rusted surface a silent testament to the crime. Elaine took the stand, her voice steady but heavy with grief. He trusted him, she said of Ronald, and that trust was his death. Walker's defense was a desperate scramble. They claimed Ronald's death was accidental, that the anchor was a clumsy attempt to retrieve him from the water, but the jury wasn't swayed. The Rolex, still ticking in evidence, was a clock that ran out on Walker's lies. After a week of deliberation, they returned with a verdict: guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to life, calling him a man without conscience, a danger to all who cross. Walker showed no remorse, his eyes scanning the courtroom as if searching for one last con. In prison, Walker's story didn't end. He was extradited to Canada in 2005 to face fraud charges, where he pleaded guilty to stealing $3,200,000, 0 cents. He remains behind bars, his parole denied in 2020, his charm no match for a system that finally saw through him. The Lady Jane sits abandoned in a marina, its deck stained by a crime the sea couldn't wash away. But the shadows linger. Why, Ronald? Was it just a threat of exposure, or did Walker see something in his friend's trusting eyes that he envied, something he could never have? The Rolex, now in a police archive, keeps it secret, its hands frozen at the moment a life was stolen. As the rain falls outside, picture the English Channel, its waves whispering of lost souls. Ronald Platt's story is a warning. A trust is a fragile thing, and some men will kill to keep it buried. Part 3, a controlling relationship turned deadly. Sydney, Australia, is a city of dreams, its skyline a mosaic of glass towers reflecting the Pacific's endless blue. In 2011, the Meriton Apartments in the heart of the city stood as a symbol of wealth and ambition, their 15th-floor balconies offering views that stretched to the horizon. But inside one of those apartments, Behind floor-to-ceiling windows, a nightmare was unfolding. Lisa Cecilia Harnum, a 30-year-old Canadian with a smile that could light up a room, was living a life that looked perfect from the outside. To those who saw her, she was the picture of success. Beautiful, poised, the fiancée of a wealthy businessman. But beauty can hide bruises, and perfection can mask a prison. Lisa had come to Sydney in 2005 chasing a new chapter. Born in Canada, she was a hairdresser by trade, her hands skilled at transforming others while her heart yearned for adventure. Sydney, with its vibrant energy, seemed the perfect place to start over. She found work, made friends, and settled into a life that felt full of promise. Then, in 2010, she met Simon Gidney. Gidney was 37, a man who carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd always gotten what he wanted. Tall, with dark eyes and a charisma that could fill a room, he was a businessman with a past that flickered at the edges. Convictions for drug dealing and assault, hushed up but never quite forgotten. To Lisa, though, he was a whirlwind of charm, sweeping her into a romance that felt like a fairy tale. He showered her with gifts, took her to upscale restaurants, and promised a future of luxury. Within months, they were engaged, living together in a lavish apartment at the Meriton, their life a glossy Instagram post come to life. But fairy tales have shadows, and Gidney's was darker than most. Beneath his polished exterior was a man consumed by control. Lisa, vibrant and independent, began to change. Friends noticed her withdrawing, her laughter growing rare. She quit her job at Gidney's insistence, her days now spent in the apartment under his watchful eye. He chose her clothes, dictating skirts over jeans, high heels over flats. He monitored her phone, her emails, her every move. In the apartment, hidden cameras recorded her every step, their lenses a silent jury. Gidney had installed spyware on her laptop, tracking her messages, her searches, her thoughts. Lisa wasn't a fiancée. She was a prisoner. The apartment, with its sleek marble floors and panoramic views, became a gilded cage. Gidney's rules were ironclad. No male friends, no unapproved outings, no defiance. Lisa's world shrank to the walls around her, her once bright spirit dimming under his grip. She confided in her physiotherapist, Joan, during rare moments alone. "I want to leave," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I'm scared." He's always watching. Joan urged her to plan an escape, to reach out to her family in Canada. Lisa nodded, but fear held her fast. Gidney wasn't just controlling. He was dangerous. On July 28, 2011, the cage began to crack. Lisa discovered the spyware on her laptop, a digital leash she hadn't known existed. She confronted Gidney, her voice rising in a mix of anger and desperation. The argument was explosive, their shouts echoing through the apartment's sterile halls. Lisa was done hiding, done pretending. She wanted out. Gidney, enraged, saw his control slipping. The next day, July 29, the tension simmered, a storm waiting to break. Lisa texted Joan, her words frantic. "He's watching everything. I don't know what to do." On the morning of July 3rd, 2011, the Meriton apartments were quiet, the city waking slowly under a winter sun. At 9:47 a.m., a scream shattered the silence. It came from the 15th floor, sharp and fleeting, swallowed by the hum of traffic below. Moments later, a body fell, plummeting 50 meters to the pavement. Lisa Harnum was dead, her body crumpled on the concrete, her dreams extinguished in an instant. Passers-by froze, their gasps mingling with the wail of approaching sirens. Above, on the balcony, Simon Gidney stood alone, his face unreadable. The police arrived within minutes, cordoning off the scene as a crowd gathered. Lisa's body bore no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, no torn clothing. Her purse, found nearby, held a torn note, its words chilling. "There are cameras everywhere. I'm scared." The note was crumpled, as if she'd clutched it in her final moments. Gidney told police it was suicide, his voice steady, his eyes dry. Lisa, he said, had been depressed, overwhelmed by their engagement, haunted by a past he vaguely alluded to. "She jumped," he insisted. "I tried to stop her." But the police weren't convinced. Suicide didn't explain the note, the cameras, or the man who seemed too calm for someone who just lost his fiancée. They searched the apartment, finding a network of surveillance cameras, hallways, living room, bedroom, all feeding to Gidney's computer. The footage from that morning was missing, conveniently deleted, but one camera in the hallway outside hadn't been touched. Its grainy images told a story Gidney couldn't erase. At 9:45 a.m., the footage showed Lisa stepping into the hallway, a bag slung over her shoulder. Her movements hurried. She was leaving, her face set with determination. Seconds later, Gitney appeared, his stride purposeful. He grabbed her, dragging her back into the apartment, his grip tight on her arm. The door slammed shut. 2 minutes later, Lisa was dead. The footage was a silent scream, a truth Gitney couldn't outrun. The investigation deepened, peeling back the layers of Gitney's control. Joan, the physiotherapist, took the stand, her voice steady as she recounted Lisa's fear, her plans to flee. She was trapped, Joan said, her words heavy with regret. She loved him once, but love became a cage. Friends from Canada spoke of Lisa's vibrant spirit, how it faded after meeting Gitney. Her mother, Pauline, flew from Ontario, her grief a raw wound. My daughter was strong, she told detectives. She wouldn't give up. Not like this. Forensic evidence tightened the noose. Lisa's body showed no signs of a suicidal leap. There were no fingerprints on the balcony railing, no scuff marks to suggest she'd climbed over. Her injuries, fractured skull, shattered pelvis, were consistent with being thrown, not jumping. A neighbor below reported hearing a man's voice shouting just before the fall, followed by a woman's cry. The torn note, analyzed by experts, bore traces of Lisa's DNA as if she'd held it tightly, a final plea for someone to understand. Gitney's past came under scrutiny. His criminal record, drug charges, a violent assault, painted a picture of a man prone to rage. Former girlfriends testified to his jealousy, his need to dominate. One recalled him installing cameras in her apartment, his excuses eerily similar to those he'd given Lisa. The prosecution built a case of coercive control, arguing that Gitney's obsession with power had driven him to murder when Lisa dared to break free. The trial began in 2013 at the Supreme Court of New South Wales, and Sydney watched, transfixed. Gitney, now 40, sat in the dock, his charm replaced by a scowl. The prosecution played the hallway footage, the courtroom silent as Lisa's final moments unfolded. This was no suicide, the prosecutor said, her voice cutting through the tension. This was a man who couldn't let go, who chose murder over losing control. The torn note was displayed, its words projected on a screen. There are cameras everywhere. I'm scared. Jurors shifted uncomfortably, their eyes on Gitney. The defense fought back, painting Lisa as unstable, her death a tragic impulse. They called a psychologist who speculated about her mental state, citing her isolation as evidence of depression. Gitney took the stand, his voice smooth but strained. I loved her, he said, his eyes scanning the jury. I tried to save her, but she was too far gone. But his words rang hollow. The footage, the note, the absence of fingerprints. They told a different story. The most damning testimony came from a forensic expert who'd reconstructed the fall. Lisa didn't jump, he said, his diagram stark on the courtroom screen. Her body's trajectory suggests force, a push from behind. She was thrown. The courtroom buzzed, Gitney's composure cracking. Joan's testimony followed, her recounting of Lisa's fear bringing tears to jurors' eyes. She wanted to live, Joan said. She was ready to fight for her freedom. The jury deliberated for 2 days, the weight of the evidence heavy on their shoulders. On November 15, 2013, they returned with a verdict, guilty of murder. Gitney's face was stone as the judge sentenced him to 26 years with a minimum of 18 before parole. You robbed a young woman of her life, the judge said, his voice stern. Your actions were deliberate, driven by a need to dominate. Lisa's mother wept quietly, clutching a photo of her daughter. Sydney exhaled, but the scars remained. The Meriton apartment, once a symbol of aspiration, now carried a ghost. Lisa's story sparked conversations about coercive control, a hidden abuse that kills without leaving bruises. Laws were proposed, awareness campaigns launched, but for Lisa, it was too late. Her mother returned to Canada, carrying her daughter's memory in a locket. Joan, the physiotherapist, retired, haunted by the what-ifs. But the shadows linger. What drove Gitney to such extremes? Was it love twisted into possession, or a darkness that had always lived within him? The cameras he installed meant to trap Lisa became his undoing, their footage a silent witness to his crime. Somewhere in that apartment, the echo of Lisa's scream remains, a reminder of a life stolen too soon. As the rain falls outside, imagine Sydney's skyline, its lights flickering like stars. Lisa Harnum's story is a warning. Love can be a chain, and some will kill to keep it locked. Part 4. The Gay Slayer. London, 1993. The city pulsed with life, its streets alive with the hum of music, the clink of pint glasses, and the laughter of those who found freedom in the night. In the heart of Earl's Court, the Coleherne pub was a beacon for London's gay community, a haven where men could be themselves, where love and camaraderie thrived under the glow of neon lights. But in the spring of that year, a shadow crept into the Coleherne, unnoticed, unassuming, and deadly. His name was Colin Ireland, and he was hunting. Ireland was 39, a man who blended into the crowd like a ghost. Tall, with a gaunt face and eyes that seemed to see too much, he was a drifter. A loner who'd spent his life on the fringes, born in Dartford, Kent. His childhood was a patchwork of neglect and rejection, bullied for his awkwardness, shuttled between foster homes, and haunted by a father who was more absence than presence. By adulthood, Ireland was a man without roots, drifting through jobs. Soldier, chef, bouncer, never staying long enough to belong. He'd married twice, fathered a daughter, but those ties had frayed, leaving him alone with his thoughts. And those thoughts were dark. In early 1993, Ireland made a chilling resolution. He wanted to be remembered, to etch his name into history, but not as a hero or a creator. He wanted to be a serial killer, a name whispered in fear. He studied the greats, Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, devouring their methods like a scholar. He learned how to evade capture, how to leave no trace, how to choose victims who wouldn't be missed. And he chose his hunting ground, the gay community, a group he believed was vulnerable, their lives too often ignored by a society steeped in prejudice. To Ireland, they were perfect prey. His first target was Peter Walker, a 45-year-old theater director known for his warmth and wit. On March 8, 1993, Peter was at the Coleherne sipping a drink, his laughter drawing smiles. Ireland approached, his demeanor soft, almost shy. He played the part of a curious newcomer, asking Peter about the scene, his voice low and disarming. Peter, ever generous, invited him back to his Battersea flat for a drink. It was a gesture of trust, a moment of connection. It was also a fatal mistake. Inside Peter's flat, the mask fell. Ireland's shy facade gave way to cold precision. He bound Peter with cords, his movements practiced, deliberate. What followed was hours of torment, beatings, burns, and a cruelty that seemed to feed Ireland's emptiness. Peter begged for his life, his voice hoarse, but Ireland was deaf to mercy. He strangled him with a belt, watching the light fade from Peter's eyes. Before leaving, he arranged the body in a grotesque tableau. Teddy bears placed in Peter's arms, a mocking signature. He cleaned the flat meticulously, wiping surfaces, burning papers, erasing himself from the scene. By dawn, he was gone, a phantom slipping back into London's maze. The police found Peter's body 2 days later after friends raised the alarm. The flat was pristine, the crime scene eerily sterile. Detectives noted the bindings, the burns, the teddy bears, but without fingerprints or DNA, they were stumped. The murder was labeled a homosexual killing, a term that carried the weight of society's indifference. Peter's friends mourned, but the case faded from the headlines, just as Ireland had planned. He struck again in May. Christopher Dunn, a 37-year-old librarian, was at the Coleherne, his quiet charm catching Ireland's eye. Like Peter, Christopher invited him home to his wheelstone flat, unaware of the danger in Ireland's smile. The pattern repeated. Binding, torture, strangulation. Ireland left another signature. This time a condom placed near the body, a cruel taunt. He cleaned the scene, burned Christopher's ID, and vanished. The police linked the murders through their similarities, bound victims, staged scenes. But with no witnesses, no forensics, the trail was cold. June brought 3 more victims, Ireland's pace accelerating, his hunger insatiable. Perry Bradley, a 35-year-old businessman, was killed in his Kensington flat, his body bound with rope, a doll placed beside him. Andrew Collier, a 33-year-old housing officer, met the same fate in Dalston, his cat strangled beside him, a grim echo of Ireland's cruelty. Manuel Spiteri, a 41-year-old chef, was the last, murdered in Catford, his body tied with electrical cords, a lighter left in his hand. Each crime was a masterpiece of control, Ireland's planning flawless gloves, bleach, burner phones. He even called the police anonymously, taunting them with details only the killer would know. "You're not looking hard enough," he sneered, his voice a chilling whisper. London was on edge. The gay community, already marginalized, felt hunted. The Cohern, once a sanctuary, was now a place of fear, its patrons glancing over their shoulders. The police formed a task force, Operation Heart, to catch the killer. They canvassed bars, interviewed hundreds, but Ireland was a shadow, always one step ahead. The media dubbed him the Gay Slayer, a name that fueled panic and stigma. For Ireland, it was validation, his twisted dream coming true. But even the most careful predators leave footprints. The break came in July at Andrew Collier's flat. A single fingerprint overlooked in Ireland's cleaning frenzy was found on a window latch. It matched Colin Ireland, a man with a minor record, petty theft, nothing violent. The police dug deeper, pulling CCTV from a bank near the Cohern. There he was, withdrawing cash with Andrew's card, his face clear under the camera's glare. They traced his movements, finding a bedsit in South London where he lived alone, surrounded by books on serial killers and newspaper clippings of his crimes. On July 21, 1993, Ireland walked into a solicitor's office claiming he had information about the murders. It was a bold move, a test of his own arrogance. The solicitor, sensing something off, alerted the police. When they arrived, Ireland didn't run. He sat calmly, his hands folded, and confessed. "I did it," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "All 5. I wanted to be famous." He detailed each killing with clinical precision, dates, methods, signatures, his words, a chilling catalog of horror. He spoke of his victims as objects, their lives reduced to steps in his plan. The police were stunned. Ireland wasn't the frenzied killer they'd imagined. He was methodical, detached, a man who'd turned murder into a science. They searched his bedsit, finding gloves, cords, and a diary where he'd rated his kills, noting improvements for next time. The evidence was overwhelming. Fingerprints, CCTV, his own words. Ireland had built his own gallows. The trial began in December 1993 at the Old Bailey, London's historic court. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. Ireland, now 40, stood in the dock, his gaunt face impassive. The prosecution laid out his crimes in harrowing detail, calling witnesses who'd known the victims, friends, lovers, colleagues. Peter's partners spoke of his generosity, Christopher's sister of his quiet kindness, the teddy bears, the dolls, the strangled cat. They weren't just signatures. They were Ireland's attempt to mock, to dehumanize. This was not passion, the prosecutor said, his voice steady. This was a man who killed for sport. Ireland pleaded guilty, sparing the jury a deliberation. He offered no motive beyond his desire for infamy, no remorse beyond a shrug. The judge, his voice heavy with disgust, sentenced him to 5 life terms, calling him exceptionally frightening and dangerous. Ireland nodded as if accepting a compliment. The gallery erupted, some in tears, others in anger. The victims' families left silently, their grief a weight no verdict could lift. Ireland spent his days in prison, first at Wakefield, then Whitemoor, a figure both feared and reviled. He wrote letters claiming he'd reformed, but his words rang hollow. In 2012, at 57, he died of pulmonary fibrosis, alone in a cell, his dream of fame twisted into infamy. The Cohern pub closed years later, its legacy tainted. London's gay community rebuilt, but the scars of 1993 never fully healed. The shadows linger. Why did Ireland choose these men? Was it hatred, envy, or a void so deep it craved destruction? His diary, now in police archives, holds no answers, only a list of names and a chilling tally. 5 lives, stolen for a moment's notoriety. As the rain falls outside, picture London's streets, their lights dimmed by memory. Colin Ireland's story is a warning. Evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks into a bar, orders a drink, and smiles. Part 5, a double murder for greed. Costa Mesa, California is a place where the sun never seems to set, a suburban haven of palm trees, strip malls, and dreams that feel just within reach. In 2010, the city hummed with the rhythm of everyday life, its residents going about their days, unaware of the darkness brewing in a quiet apartment complex on Pine Creek Drive. He had 2 lives converge in a tragedy that would shock a community. Julie Kabushi, a 25-year-old aspiring accountant with a contagious laugh. and Sam Herr, a 26-year-old Army veteran whose courage hit a vulnerable heart. Their killer was someone they trusted, a man whose charm masked a monster. His name was Daniel Wozniak. Wozniak was 26, a local theater actor with a boyish grin and a knack for stealing the spotlight. To those who knew him, he was a dreamer, always chasing the next big role, the next big break. He lived in the same apartment complex as Sam Herr, their balconies close enough to share a shouted joke or a wave. Wozniak's life, though, was a house of cards. He was drowning in debt, his acting gigs barely covering rent, let alone the lavish wedding he'd promised his fiancée, Rachel Buffet. Rachel, a fellow actor, believed in Daniel's dreams, but their future was a fantasy built on borrowed time and borrowed money. Sam Herr was the opposite of Wozniak. A combat veteran who'd served in Afghanistan, Sam carried the weight of war in his quiet strength. He had returned to Costa Mesa to rebuild, enrolling at Orange Coast College to study business, his GI Bill savings, $62,000, 0 cents, tucked away for a fresh start. Sam was generous, always ready to help a friend, and he saw Wozniak as one. They'd bonded over beers, Wozniak's easy charm drawing Sam in, and Julie Kabushi, Sam's friend from college, was a bright spot in his life. With her quick wit and warm smile, she dreamed of a career in finance, her future as bright as the California sun. But to Wozniak, Sam and Julie weren't friends. They were a means to an end. His debts were mounting, credit cards maxed, wedding vendors unpaid, Rachel growing restless. Sam's savings, mentioned casually over drinks, became an obsession. Wozniak saw a way out, a path to the life he felt he deserved. All it would take was a plan, a gun, and a heart cold enough to pull the trigger. On May 21, 2010, Wozniak set his plan in motion. He called Sam, his voice casual, inviting him to the Liberty Theater on a nearby naval base. "I need help moving some boxes for a show," Wozniak said, knowing Sam's loyalty would bring him running. Sam agreed, driving to the theater that afternoon, his guard down. The Liberty was deserted, its attic a maze of shadows and dust. Wozniak led Sam up the creaking stairs, chatting about nothing, his hand steady on the .38 revolver hidden in his jacket. In the attic, Wozniak struck. He raised the gun and fired twice, the shots echoing through the empty theater. Sam collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes wide with betrayal. Wozniak didn't flinch. He dragged Sam's body to a corner, covering it with a tarp, and left, locking the attic behind him. Phase 1 was complete. But Wozniak's plan was far from over. He needed a scapegoat, someone to take the fall for what came next. That night, Wozniak used Sam's phone to text Julie Kabushi. "Meet me at my place," the message read, mimicking Sam's tone. "Need to talk." Julie, trusting her friend, drove to Sam's apartment, her mind on their shared dreams, unaware of the trap, waiting. Wozniak was there, the gun still warm in his pocket. When Julie knocked, he opened the door, his smile disarming. Moments later, he fired twice, once in her chest, once in her head. Julie fell, her body crumpling in the living room, her dreams extinguished in a heartbeat. Wozniak staged the scene, leaving Sam's fingerprints on the gun, crafting a narrative of a veteran driven to murder and flight. But Wozniak wasn't done. To erase Sam's identity, he returned to the theater attic the next day. With a hacksaw and a chilling calm, he dismembered Sam's body, severing head, arms, and legs. He scattered the parts in Long Beach's El Dorado Park, hiding them in bushes and streams, keeping Sam's torso in a duffel bag for later disposal. The brutality was staggering, a testament to Wozniak's desperation to cover his tracks. He withdrew cash from Sam's account using his ATM card for pizza deliveries, each transaction a taunt to the police he thought he'd outsmarted. The plan unraveled faster than Wozniak expected. On May 22, Julie's family, worried by her silence, called the Costa Mesa police. Officers found her body in Sam's apartment, the staged scene raising immediate red flags. Sam's absence made him the prime suspect, but his friends were skeptical. Sam would never hurt Julie, one told detectives. He wasn't that guy. The police traced Sam's ATM card, which led them to a 17-year-old named Wesley Fresh, a local teen who'd used it for withdrawals and pizza orders. Wesley, nervous under questioning, pointed the finger at Wozniak. "He gave me the card," Wesley said. Said it belonged to a friend who didn't need it anymore. Wozniak was now a person of interest. On May 26, 2010, police tracked him to his bachelor party, a surreal scene of laughter and champagne just days after a double murder. They arrested him midtown, his fiancée Rachel watching in shock. In the interrogation room, Wozniak was a chameleon, spinning lies with the ease of a seasoned actor. He claimed Sam had killed Julie and fled, that he'd only used the card to help a friend in trouble, but the police had a trump card, a DNA bluff. "We found your prints on the gun," they lied, watching Wozniak's facade crack. Under pressure, Wozniak broke. His confession was a chilling monologue delivered with the detachment of a man reciting lines. He admitted luring Sam to the theater, shooting him, and dismembering his body to hide the crime. He described texting Julie, killing her to frame Sam, and staging the apartment to sell the story. "I needed the money," he said, his voice flat. "Sam had it. The motive was stark. Greed. Pure and unadorned, fueled by a wedding he couldn't afford and a life he couldn't sustain." The police searched Wozniak's apartment, finding a backpack he'd asked his brother to discard. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence: the .38 revolver, Sam's bank details, and a receipt for the hacksaw. Rachel Buffett, questioned separately, claimed ignorance, but her story wavered. She'd lied to police about Wozniak's alibi, a choice that would later cost her. The investigation widened, divers recovering Sam's remains from El Dorado Park, each fragment a testament to Wozniak's cruelty. The community reeled, their suburban idyll shattered by a killer who'd walked among them. The trial began in December 2015 in Orange County's Superior Court, a media frenzy that gripped California. Wozniak, now 31, sat in the dock, his boyish charm replaced by a hollow stare. The prosecution painted him as a predator, a man who betrayed trust for profit. They played recordings of his confession, his voice chilling the courtroom. Witnesses took the stand. Sam's parents, their grief raw as they spoke of their son's honor. Julie's sister, her voice breaking as she described her dreams. Wesley Fresh, now 22, trembling as he recounted Wozniak's manipulation. But the most haunting moment came when Sam's father, Steve Herr, faced Wozniak. "You took my boy," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "You took his future, his kindness, for what, a few dollars?" The courtroom was silent, Wozniak's eyes fixed on the floor. Rachel Buffett, tried separately, was a shadow over the proceedings. Her lies to police earned her a conviction as an accessory, a 32-month sentence that left her free by 2019. But Wozniak was the architect, the puppeteer of a tragedy that left two families broken. The defense argued insanity, claiming Wozniak's death and pressure had snapped his mind. They called a psychologist who spoke of stress-induced psychosis, but the jury saw through the smoke. The evidence was a mountain. Ballistics matching the gun, DNA on the hacksaw, Wozniak's own words sealing his fate. On September 23, 2016, the verdict came. Guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to death, calling his actions heinous, a betrayal of the deepest kind. Wozniak showed no emotion, his dreams of fame now a footnote in a cell on death row. Casa Mesa has tried to heal, but the Pine Creek Drive apartments carry a ghost. Sam's parents established a scholarship in his name, a tribute to his resilience. Julie's family planted a tree at her college, its leaves a quiet memorial. Rachel, free but ostracized, faded from the spotlight, her role in the tragedy a lingering question. Wozniak remains at San Quentin, his appeals dragging on, his story a cautionary tale of ambition gone feral. The shadows linger. What drove Wozniak to such depths? Was it just the money, or a need to play God, to rewrite lives for his own script? The theater attic, now boarded up, holds no answers. Only the echo of a gunshot and a friendship betrayed. As the rain falls outside, picture Costa Mesa's sunlit streets, their warmth now tinged with loss. Daniel Wozniak's story is a warning. Greed can wear a friend's face, and some debts are paid in blood. Part 6, a revenge killing. Goa, India, is a land of contrasts, where turquoise waves kiss golden beaches and ancient temples stand guard over bustling markets. In 2016, the quiet enclave of Subaraj Valley in North Goa was a haven for dreamers and drifters, its gated community a patchwork of modern flats and tropical gardens. Here, Monica Good, a 39-year-old perfume expert, had carved out a life of independence and ambition. With her sharp mind and warm smile, she was a woman who seemed untouchable, the daughter of a former Mumbai judge whose legacy she carried with pride. But in the shadows of her success, a grudge was festering, its roots deep and venomous. Monica had arrived in Goa in June 2016, renting a second-floor flat in Subaraj Valley. Her life was a whirlwind of creativity, She crafted bespoke fragrances for clients across India, her perfumes a blend of art and alchemy. To neighbors, she was a quiet presence. Her days spent mixing scents in her apartment, her evenings filled with phone calls to family in Mumbai. But Monica's world wasn't without its tensions. The gated community, with its security guards and manicured lawns, had its own undercurrents. Petty thefts, whispered complaints, and a young guard named Raj Kumar, whose obsession would prove deadly. Raj was 21, a wiry man with a restless energy that set him apart. Hired as a security guard in May 2016, he was new to Sabar Raj Valley, his job a lifeline after a childhood of poverty in a nearby village. Raj was diligent at first, patrolling the grounds with a flashlight, his uniform crisp. When Monica moved in, he was assigned to show her the flat, his eyes lingering a little too long on her confident stride, her elegant clothes. To Raj, Monica was a vision of a world he'd never touch. Wealthy, educated, untouchable, his fascination grew, a mix of admiration and resentment. Each smile she offered, fueling a fantasy he couldn't shake. But Raj's world unraveled in August 2016. A resident reported a stolen umbrella from Monica's balcony, a minor theft that pointed to Raj after a guard saw him near her flat. Monica, frustrated but calm, complained to the society's manager, her words measured but firm. Raj was fired on the spot, his protests ignored. He left Subaraj Valley humiliated, his pride a raw wound. In his mind, Monica wasn't just a complainant, she was the architect of his downfall, a woman who'd stripped him of his dignity. Revenge became his obsession, a dark seed that grew with every sleepless night. For 2 months, Raj plotted. He watched Monica from afar, learning her routines, her morning jogs, her late-night work sessions, the time she was alone. He stole a master key from a former colleague, its weight a promise of retribution. On October 3, 2016, Raj returned to Subaraj Valley under the cover of night. He slipped past the gates, his face hidden by a cap, and climbed to the society's terrace, where he hid for 2 days. He ate scraps, drank from a bottle, and waited, his anger a fire that burned hotter with each passing hour. Monica, unaware, went about her life, her apartment a sanctuary she believed was safe. On October 5th, the trap was set. At 8 p.m., Monica was home, her windows glowing against the dusk. Raj descended from the terrace, the master key cold in his hand. He knocked, his voice steady as he called through the door. "Security check, ma'am. There's been a leak reported." Monica, trusting the familiar uniform, opened the door. Raj stepped inside, his smile a mask. The door clicked shut, and the world outside fell silent. What followed was a nightmare. Raj's rage erupted, his hands finding a scarf on Monica's couch. He bound her wrists, his movements frantic but precise. Monica fought, her screams muffled by a pillow he pressed to her face. The struggle was brief but brutal. Raj overpowered her, his strength fueled by months of festering hatred. He raped her, a final act of domination, then suffocated her with the pillow, watching as her body stilled. The apartment, once filled with the scent of jasmine and oud, was now a tomb, its air heavy with death. Raj didn't flee immediately. He lingered, his mind a storm of panic and triumph. He ate eggs from Monica's fridge, scooped ice cream from a tub, and rifled through her purse, taking her debit card and $200, 0 cents in cash. He left the flat at midnight, locking the door behind him, the master key discarded in a drain. He used Monica's card at an ATM in Ponda, withdrawing small sums, then boarded a bus to Bangalore, believing distance would erase his sin. Monica's absence was noticed the next morning, October 6. Her maid, Lakshmi, arrived at 9 a.m., ringing the bell to no answer. Worried, she called Monica's brother Arjun in Mumbai. Arjun, sensing something wrong, contacted a neighbor with a duplicate key. They entered the flat together, the air inside thick with an unnatural stillness. Monica's body lay on the living room floor, her hands bound, her clothes torn. The neighbor gasped, Lakshmi's scream echoing down the hall. Arjun, on the phone, heard the chaos, his voice breaking as he begged for the police. The Goa police arrived swiftly, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene. The flat showed no signs of forced entry, no missing valuables beyond the debit card and cash. The autopsy confirmed the horror. Monica had been raped and suffocated, her death occurring around 9 p.m. the previous night. Bruises on her wrists and neck told of a struggle, her fingernails holding traces of skin, DNA that would become a key to the case. The police found debit card receipts in Monica's purse, but the card itself was gone, a clue that sparked a hunt. The investigation moved with urgency. ATM transactions traced Monica's card to Ponda, then Bangalore, the timestamps forming a trail. CCTV footage from the Ponda ATM showed a man in a cap, his face partially visible but distinct, Raj Kumar, the fired guard. The society's manager confirmed his identity, recalling his bitterness after the dismissal. He blamed Monica, the manager said, his voice heavy, said she ruined his life. The police issued an alert, their net tightening around Bangalore, a city of millions where Raj thought he could vanish. On October 8, 2016, Raj was cornered in a Bangalore slum, his cap still pulled low. He tried to run, but the police were faster, their cuffs snapping around his wrists. In the interrogation room, Raj was defiant at first, claiming he'd found the debit card, that he was innocent. But the evidence was a wall he couldn't climb. DNA under Monica's nails, CCTV footage, and a bus ticket from Goa to Bangalore in his pocket. Faced with the truth, Raj crumbled, his confession spilling like a dam breaking. "I hated her," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "She got me fired, took my job, my respect. I wanted her to feel what I felt." He described hiding on the terrace, the master key, the moment he knocked on her door. He admitted to the rape, the murder, the casual meal he ate as Monica's body cooled. "I didn't plan to kill her," he lied, his eyes darting. "It just happened." But the police saw through him. The planning, the waiting, it was a murder born of cold calculation, not impulse. The community of Subaraj Valley was shattered. Monica's neighbors gathered outside her flat, lighting candles, their faces etched with grief and fear. Her family arrived from Mumbai, her father's judicial stoicism broken by the loss of his daughter. "She was my pride," he told reporters, his voice barely whisper. "Her light is gone." Arjun, Monica's brother, vowed to seek justice, his anger a quiet fire. The case sparked outrage in Goa, a state that prided itself on safety, now stained by a crime that felt too close, too personal. Raj's trial began on January 6, 2017, in a Panaji courtroom packed with journalists and mourners. The prosecution laid out a case of premeditated horror, presenting the DNA, the CCTV, and Raj's confession. Witnesses painted a picture of his obsession. Guards who'd heard him curse Monica's name. A friend who'd seen him sketching her flat's layout. Lakshmi, the maid, took the stand, her voice trembling as she described Monica's kindness, her habit of sharing tea on quiet mornings. "She didn't deserve this," Lakshmi said, her eyes on Raj. The defense argued diminished responsibility, claiming Raj's poverty and humiliation had driven him to a breaking point. They called a psychiatrist who spoke of reactive rage, but the jury wasn't swayed. Raj's actions, the terrace hideout, the stolen key, the calculated escape, spoke of a mind that planned, not one that snapped. The trial, though, stretched on, delayed by legal maneuvers in India's overburdened courts. As of 2025, Raj remains in custody, his sentencing pending, a shadow over Monica's memory. Goa has tried to move forward, but Subaraj Valley carries a scar. Monica's flat stands empty, its windows dark, a reminder of a life stolen. Her perfumes, once sold in boutiques, are now collector's items, their scents a fading echo of her talent. Her family funds a scholarship in her name supporting women in the arts, a legacy of light in a story of darkness. Raj, in a cell, awaits his fate, his revenge a hollow victory that cost him everything. The shadows linger. What turned Raj's admiration into hatred? Was it just the loss of a job or a deeper wound? A resentment for a world that seemed to favor others? The master key, recovered from the drain, holds no answers. Only the weight of a door opened to horror. As the rain falls outside, picture Goa's beaches, their beauty now tinged with sorrow. Monica Good's story is a warning. Vengeance is a fire that consumes all, and some grudges end in graves. Part 7, A Black Widow's Deception. Keller, Texas is the kind of place where dreams take root. A suburban oasis of manicured lawns, cul-de-sacs, and the promise of a good life. In 2011, the Williams family seemed to embody that dream. Greg Williams, a 40-year-old IT manager, was the anchor, a steady man with a quick laugh and a devotion to his daughter, Taylor, who was just starting kindergarten. His wife, Michelle, 37, was the spark, blonde, charismatic with a smile that could charm anyone. Their home on Big Horn Trail was a picture of success, its brick facade hiding a marriage that was anything but. Behind closed doors, Michelle was spinning a web, and Greg, was her prey. Michelle Williams was a woman who thrived on control. Raised in a chaotic Fort Worth household, she learned early how to bend the world to her will. Her father, a small-time con artist, taught her the art of deception. Forged checks, fake tears, stories that twisted truth into profit. By her teens, Michelle was a master, her beauty a weapon she wielded with precision. She married young, twice, each husband left drained, financially, emotionally, and broken. When she met Greg in 2007, she saw a new Mark, a stable man with a six-figure salary, a house, and a heart to trust him for his own good. Their romance was a whirlwind. Greg, recently divorced, was dazzled by Michelle's energy, her promises of a passionate future. They married in 2008, blending their lives with Taylor, Greg's daughter from his first marriage. To neighbors, they were the perfect couple, Michelle hosting barbecues, Greg coaching Taylor's soccer team. But beneath the surface, their marriage was a battleground. Michelle's world revolved around control, her desires rooted in a lifestyle Greg's income couldn't sustain. She craved luxury, designer clothes, a bigger house, vacations she posted online to flaunt a life they didn't have. Greg, practical and grounded, tried to rein her in, but Michelle was relentless. Their relationship, built on a foundation of BDSM dynamics, gave her an outlet for dominance. Greg submitting to her demands in ways that blurred love and manipulation. She pushed for a $4,500,000 zero-cents mansion, forging mortgage documents to secure a loan they couldn't afford. Greg, unaware of the fraud, signed papers she placed before him, his trust her greatest asset. By 2011, the cracks were showing. Bounced checks, max credit cards, and a $600,000 zero-cents life insurance policy on Greg that Michelle had quietly taken out. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., a 911 call shattered the pre-dawn quiet of Bighorn Trail. Michelle's voice was frantic, her words tumbling over each other. "Someone broke in. My husband's been shot. I'm hurt. Please, hurry!" Police and paramedics raced to the scene, expecting a home invasion. They found Greg in the master bedroom, a single bullet through his chest, his body cold on the hardwood floor. Michelle was in the hallway, a bruise blooming on her cheek, her wrists red as if bound. "He tied me up," she sobbed. "I fought him off, but Greg, he's gone." The scene was chaotic, but something felt off. The house showed no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no jimmied locks. Valuables, jewelry, a TV, cash sat untouched. Greg's wound, clean and precise, suggested a shooter who knew exactly where to aim. Michelle's injuries were superficial, her bruise too fresh, her story too polished. She described a masked intruder, but her details shifted. A black hoodie, then blue, a knife, then a gun. The police, trained to spot lies, grew suspicious. Michelle wasn't a victim, she was a performer. Detectives searched the house, finding a .45 caliber shell casing but no gun. A wrench in the garage, smeared with Michelle's blood, raised eyebrows, its handle clean as if wiped. Michelle claimed the intruder had hit her with it, but the blood pattern suggested she'd done it herself. Greg's autopsy revealed more, traces of sleeping pills in his system, enough to dull his senses, not enough to kill. The bullet had been fired from 12 to 18 inches away, too close for a panicked struggle, too deliberate for an accident. Michelle's story began to unravel. Neighbors reported no strange cars, no footsteps in the night. Greg's co-workers described a man under strain, confiding about Michelle's spending, her demands for a new house. He was tired, one said, but he loved Taylor too much to leave. Financial records told a darker tale. Michelle had cashed checks from Greg's account days before his death, withdrawn thousands, and contacted the insurance company about the $600,000 zero-cents policy hours after the 911 call. Her laptop revealed searches, how to stage a robbery, lethal sedatives, gunshot wounds, each timestamp a nail in her coffin. On January 9, 2012, Michelle was arrested, her charm useless against handcuffs. In the interrogation room, she tried every trick, tears, defiance, a claim that Greg had shot himself. "I covered it up," she said, her voice shaking. He was depressed, wanted Taylor to have the insurance money. But the police had her cornered. The wrench, the pills, the missing gun. They pointed to a woman who'd planned a murder and botched the cover-up. When confronted with the laptop searches, Michelle went silent, her eyes cold, her mask finally gone. The investigation dug into Michelle's past, uncovering a trail of deception. Her first husband spoke of drained accounts, her second of forged signatures. A former lover described her obsession with control, how she'd manipulate with sex and lies. The BDSM dynamic with Greg, consensual at first, had become a tool for coercion. Michelle exploiting his trust to bend his will through the $4 billion, $500,000, 0 cents house, a symbol of her greed, was the tipping point. Its mortgage fraud exposed just weeks before Greg's death, threatening to unravel her carefully curated life. The trial began in April 2014 in Tarrant County, Texas, a courtroom drama that gripped Keller. Michelle, now 40, sat in the dock, her blonde hair pulled back, her face a study in defiance. The prosecution painted her as a black widow, a predator who'd spun a web of lies to trap Greg. They presented the wrench. Its blood a silent accusation. A forensic expert testified about the gunshot, its angle suggesting the shooter standing over a sedated victim. When the laptop searches were displayed, each query a window into Michelle's mind. Witnesses brought the case to life. Taylor's teacher spoke of Greg's devotion, how he'd light up talking about his daughter. A bank teller recounted Michelle's frantic withdrawals, her charm faltering under scrutiny. Greg's ex-wife, Taylor's mother, took the stand, her voice steady but heavy. "He was a good man," she said, glaring at Michelle. "She took him from us for money." The most damning moment came when a neighbor testified about Michelle's behavior post-murder. Calm, composed, applying makeup before police arrived, as if preparing for a role. Michelle's defense was a desperate gamble. They argued Greg's death was a suicide, that Michelle's cover-up was an act of love to protect Taylor's future. They called a psychologist who spoke of her traumatic childhood, claiming it warped her judgment. Michelle testified, her voice soft, her eyes wet. "I loved Greg," she said, clutching a tissue. "I panicked, made mistakes, but I didn't kill him." But the jury saw through her, the evidence, the pills, the wrench, the insurance calls. It was a chorus of guilt. The turning point came when prosecutors played a jailhouse call between Michelle and her mother. "They're on to me," Michelle whispered, unaware of the recording. "I should have been smarter." The courtroom buzzed, jurors exchanging glances. The defense had no answer, their case collapsing under the weight of her own words. On April 21, 2014, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of murder. The judge sentenced Michelle to 60 years with a minimum of 30 before parole, calling her a danger to anyone who trusts her. Michelle's face was stone, her tears gone, her lies spent. Keller exhaled, but the wound remained. Taylor, now with her mother, grew up without Greg's laughter, her childhood marked by a crime she'd never understand. The Bighorn Trail house was sold, its new owners unaware of the blood once spilled on its floors. Michelle's family distanced themselves, her mother refusing interviews, her father's lessons in deception, a legacy she'd perfected. In Mountain View Prison, Michelle remains unrepentant, her letters to supporters filled with claims of innocence. Her charm a flicker that refuses to die. The shadows linger. What drove Michelle to cross the line? Was it greed, a need for control, or a darkness bred in her chaotic youth? The wrench, now in evidence, holds no answers, only the echo of a blow she struck to herself. Greg's memory lives in Taylor's smile, a light Michelle could never extinguish no matter how tightly she wove her web. As the rain falls outside, picture Keller's quiet streets, their calm now tinged with loss. Michelle Williams' story is a warning. Some lies are spun so well they trap the liar, and love can be the deadliest bait of all. Part 8. A boxer's deadly obsession. And Puerto Rico pulses with life, a city where salsa rhythms spill from open windows and the ocean's breath mingles with the heat of the streets. In 2021, this vibrant capital was home to Felix Verdejo, a 27-year-old boxing star whose name was synonymous with pride. A 2012 Olympian and lightweight contender, Verdejo was a hero, his fights drawing crowds that chanted his nickname El Diamante. His face adorned billboards, his victories a beacon for an island battered by hurricanes and hardship. But beneath the shine of his fame, a darkness was growing, an obsession that would lead to a crime that shook Puerto Rico to its core. Verdejo's life seemed golden. Married to Elisa Santiago, a model with a radiant smile, he was a father to their young daughter Mirabel and a role model to thousands. His gym in San Juan was a second home where he honed a jab as sharp as his ambition. But Verdejo carried a secret, one that threatened to shatter his carefully crafted image. For years, he'd been entangled in an affair with Keishla Rodriguez, a 27-year-old veterinary assistant who'd been his high school sweetheart. Their connection, rekindled in secret, was a dangerous thread in the fabric of his public life. Keishla was a woman of quiet strength, Her days spent caring for animals, her nights filled with dreams of a family. She knew Verdejo's marriage made their love impossible, but his promises of time, of care, kept her tethered. In early 2021, Kisla discovered she was pregnant, a revelation that filled her with hope and fear. She told Verdejo, expecting support, perhaps even a future, but Verdejo's reaction was ice. His career, his endorsements, his marriage, all hung in the balance. A child out of wedlock would be a scandal, a crack in the diamond's flawless facade. He demanded an abortion, his voice sharp, unyielding. Keishla refused, her resolve a spark he couldn't extinguish. The tension between them grew, a silent storm building over weeks. Verdejo's life, once a straight path to glory, was now a tightrope. Alisa, unaware of the affair, noticed his distraction, his late-night calls, his temper flaring at small things. Keishla, meanwhile, pressed for commitment, her texts a mix of love and frustration. Verdejo, caught between worlds, saw only one way out. He turned to a friend, Luis Antonio Cadiz, a 24-year-old with a rap sheet and a loyalty to Verdejo that ran deep. Together they hatched a plan, a crime so brutal it would stain San Juan's streets forever. On April 29, 2021, Verdejo called Keishla, his voice calm, conciliatory. "Let's meet," he said. "We'll talk about the baby, figure things out." Keishla, hopeful, agreed. Driving to a secluded spot near the San Jose Lagoon, a marshy stretch on San Juan's edge, Verdejo arrived in his black Dodge Durango, Cadiz by his side. Keishla stepped out, her eyes searching Verdejo's face for the man she'd love. Instead, she found a stranger. The confrontation was swift and savage. Words turned to shouts, Keishla's pleas drowned by Verdejo's rage. He struck her, a boxer's fist landing with devastating force, knocking her unconscious. Cadiz, following orders, held her as Verdejo injected her with a syringe, heroin, bought on the black market, enough to kill. They bound her wrists and ankles with rope, their movements practiced, as if rehearsed. Verdejo, his hands steady, tied a concrete block to her body, its weight a grim anchor. They drove to a bridge over the lagoon, the city's lights flickering in the distance. With a final shove, they threw Keishla into the water, her body sinking into the murky depths. Verdejo fired 2 shots from a 9mm pistol, ensuring she'd never surface. The lagoon swallowed her, silent and indifferent. Verdejo thought he'd erased his problem. He returned home, kissed Alisa, played with Mirabel, and went to the gym, his routine unbroken. But Keishla's absence was a scream no one could ignore. On April 30, her family reported her missing, their panic growing when her phone went dead. The Puerto Rico police, led by seasoned detective Carmen Torres, launched a search, their focus sharpening when Keishla's mother, Mary, mentioned Verdejo. She was seeing him, Mary said, her voice trembling. She was pregnant. He wasn't happy. The investigation moved with ferocious speed. Police pinged Keishla's phone, its last signal, near the San Jose Lagoon. Divers scoured the water, finding nothing at first, but on May 1, a fisherman spotted a body tangled in reeds. It was Keishla, her wrists still bound, the concrete block dragging at her waist. A tattoo on her arm, Felix, confirmed her identity, a heartbreaking signature of her love. The autopsy was grim. Blunt force trauma, heroin overdose, drowning, and 2 gunshot wounds. The unborn child, a girl, had died with her, a loss that doubled the tragedy. Verdejo was now the prime suspect. Police interviewed Alisa, whose alibi for Verdejo was vague, her loyalty wavering under scrutiny. Traffic cameras near the lagoon captured Verdejo's Durango, its license plate clear in the grainy footage. Cadiz, less disciplined, cracked under pressure, his confession spilling like a flood. "Felix told me to help," he said, his voice shaking. He said it was the only way to keep his life. Cadiz detailed the punch, the syringe, a roadmap to murder that led straight to Verdejo. On May 2, 2021, Verdejo was arrested at his San Juan home, his fame no shield against handcuffs. The city reeled, its hero unmasked as a villain. Fans who cheered his victories now burned his posters, their chants replaced by protests against gender violence. In the interrogation room, Verdejo was defiant, claiming Keishla had vanished after an argument, that he'd never touched her, but the evidence of tidal wave. DNA on the rope, gunpowder residue in his car, and Cadlez's testimony, a noose tightening around his neck. The investigation uncovered Verdejo's desperation. Text messages between him and Keishla showed his panic, his demands for an abortion growing harsher as her pregnancy progressed. A gym buddy revealed Verdejo's fear of losing endorsements, his rants about fixing the problem. Elisa, though not charged, faced public scorn, her silence seen as complicity. The concrete block, traced to a construction site near Verdejo's gym, was the final piece, its purchase linked to Cadiz's credit card. The child began in 2023 at the U.S. District Court in San Juan, a federal case, due to carjacking charges tied to Keishla's abduction. The courtroom was a battleground packed with mourners, activists, and reporters. Verdejo, now 30, sat in the dock, his once proud posture slumped, his eyes avoiding the gallery. The prosecution painted him as a man consumed by ego, willing to kill to protect his fame. They presented the rope, its fibers matching Keisha's bindings, and played traffic footage, the Durango's headlights a ghostly accusation. Witnesses brought the horror to life. Keisha's mother, Mary, took the stand, her voice a mix of grief and fury. She loved him, she said, clutching a photo of her daughter, and he threw her away like trash. Cadiz, testifying for a plea deal, recounted the murder with chilling detail, his guilt a shadow over his words. A forensic expert explained the heroin's role, its purity lethal, its source a dealer Verdejo had met through boxing contacts. The most poignant moment came when Keishla's sister, Barry Elise, read a letter to her unborn niece. "You were our hope," she said, tears falling. "He took you both." The defense argued coercion, claiming Cadiz was the mastermind, that Verdejo was a bystander in a plan gone wrong. They called a psychologist who spoke of fame's pressure, how it warped Verdejo's judgment. Verdejo testified, his voice soft, his story flimsy. "I didn't want this," he said, avoiding Keishla's name. "It wasn't supposed to happen." But the jury saw through him. The evidence, DNA, footage, Keishla, was a chorus of guilt. On November 2023, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts: carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and murder of an unborn child. The prosecution sought the death penalty, a rare request in Puerto Rico, where capital punishment is abolished locally but applies federally. Keishla's family, though, asked for life imprisonment, their mercy a stark contrast to Verdejo's cruelty. Sentencing was delayed by COVID-19 protocols, but as of 2025, Verdejo and Cadiz remain in custody, their fates a lingering question. San Juan has not forgotten. Keishla's face graces murals, her name a rallying cry against gender violence. Protests filled the streets demanding justice, not just for Keishla, but for countless women silenced by abuse. Verdejo's gym is shuttered, his billboards gone, his legacy ash. Elisa and Maribel moved away, their lives forever altered by a man they thought they knew. Keishla's family keeps her memory alive, a pet shelter in her name, caring for the animals she loved. The shadows linger. What drove Verdejo to such a brutal end? Was it fear of losing his fame? Or a deeper flaw, a heart that saw love as a threat? The concrete block, now in evidence, holds no answers, only the weight of a life dragged to the depths. As the rain falls outside, picture San Juan's vibrant streets, their music now tinged with sorrow. Felix Verdejo's story is a warning. Even diamonds can crack, and some obsessions end in blood. Part 9, a tinder trap turned deadly. Lincoln, Nebraska, is a city of wide skies and quiet dreams. Its streets lined with cornfields and the hum of small-town life. In 2017, Sydney Loof, a 24-year-old store clerk, was a bright spot in this Midwest tapestry. With her infectious laugh and kind eyes, Sydney was the friend who always showed up, whether for a late-night chat or a shift at Menards, the hardware store where she worked. But beneath her sunny exterior, Sydney carried a weight. She battled depression, a silent struggle she masked with humor, and longed for connection in a world that sometimes felt too big. Tinder, with its promise of new faces, offered a spark of hope. It also led her straight into a trap. Sydney's life was simple but full. She lived in a cozy apartment, cared for her pet lizard, and dreamed of opening a bakery, her recipes scribbled in a notebook. Her family, her mother Susie and sister Mackenzie, was her anchor, their group text a daily ritual. In early November 2017, Sydney swiped right on a profile named Audrey, a 26-year-old woman whose photos showed a confident smile and a carefree vibe. Their chats were easy, flirtatious, filled with talk of coffee dates and shared dreams. On November 14, they met in Lincoln, a casual evening that left Sydney giddy. "She's cool," she texted Mackenzie, her excitement palpable. They planned a second date for November 15. It would be Sydney's last. Audrey was not who she seemed. Her real name was Bailey Boswell, a 26-year-old drifter with a past as murky as the Platte River. Boswell was inseparable from Aubrey Trail, a 52-year-old con man with a rap sheet for fraud and theft. Together, they were a predatory duo, their lives a twisted blend of scams, sex, and a self-proclaimed vampire cult. Trail, with his gravelly voice and commanding presence, styled himself as a dark messiah, claiming supernatural powers and a harem of witches who followed his every word. Boswell, his loyal disciple, was his lure, her charm, a bait for vulnerable souls. Sydney, with her open heart, was their perfect target. The couple's operation was chillingly methodical. They lived in a basement apartment in Wilbur, a tiny town 40 miles from Lincoln, its walls reeking of bleach and secrets. Trail recruited young women through Boswell's Tinder profile, promising money, power, or love. Some joined their cult, drawn by Trail's charisma or Boswell's promises. Others left, spooked by the couple's intensity. Those who stayed faced darker demands, ritualistic sex, torture fantasies, and a loyalty that bordered on enslavement. Sydney, unaware, stepped into their world, her second date a carefully laid trap. On November 15, 2017, Sydney drove to Wilbur, her phone buzzing with text from Audrey. They met at a gas station. Boswell smiled, disarming. Sydney climbed into Boswell's car, expecting a night of laughter and connection. Instead, she was driven to the Wilbur apartment where Trail waited, his eyes gleaming with intent. What happened next is a horror pieced together from evidence and survivor testimonies, a nightmare that unfolded in the flickering light of a basement. Sydney sensed danger too late. The apartment, cluttered with occult symbols and knives, was no date spot. Trail's presence, imposing and cold, shattered the illusion. An argument erupted. Perhaps Sydney resisted their advances or questioned their intentions. The couple's plan, initially to recruit or exploit, turned deadly. They bound Sydney with zip ties, her struggles fierce but futile. Trail, claiming later it was an accident, strangled her, his hands tightening until her breath stopped. The cause of death, confirmed by autopsy, was asphyxiation, her body bearing marks of a desperate fight. The aftermath was grotesque. Trail and Boswell dismembered Sydney's body with a hacksaw, cutting it into 14 pieces to erase her existence. They stuffed the remains into black garbage bags, scattering them along rural roads in Clay County, Nebraska, their car weaving through the night. The apartment was scrubbed with bleach, every surface wiped, every trace of Sydney burned or buried. The couple, believing they'd outsmarted fate, fled to Missouri, posting videos on social media, denying involvement, their voices dripping with false innocence. Sydney's absence was a siren. On November 16, when she missed her shift at Menards, her manager called Susie Loaf. "This isn't like her," Susie said, her worry instant. The family searched Sydney's apartment, finding her phone off, her car abandoned in an alley. They reported her missing, the Lincoln police diving in with urgency. Sydney's Tinder chats, accessed through her cloud account, led to Audrey. The profile was a dead end, deleted, but phone records traced Boswell's number, its last ping near Wilbur. The investigation zeroed in on the couple. On November 18, police raided their Wilbur apartment. The bleach stench overwhelming, blood traces invisible to the naked eye glowed under luminol. Sydney's DNA confirmed by forensics. Receipts in a dumpster showed purchases on November 15, hacksaw, bleach, duct tape. A killer's shopping list from a Lincoln Walmart caught Boswell and Trail buying the tools. Their faces clear. Their cart a prelude to murder. The police issued warrants tracking the couple to Branson, Missouri, where they were arrested on November 19th, their smug videos no match for handcuffs. The search for Sydney's remains was agonizing. On December 4th, a farmer in Clay County found a garbage bag in a ditch, its contents chilling. Human remains, dismembered, bearing Sydney's tattoos. Over weeks, divers and dogs recovered 13 more bags, each piece a testament to the couple's cruelty. The autopsy revealed zip tie marks, bruising, and asphyxiation, painting a picture of a planned execution, not an accident. Trail's claim of a sex game gone wrong crumbled under the evidence's weight. The investigation peeled back the couple's world. 3 women, former witches in Trail's cult, came forward, their testimonies a window into horror. They described Boswell luring women via Tinder, Trail's promises of wealth masking sadistic rituals. "He talked about killing," one said, her voice shaking. "Said it gave him power." The women, all in their 20s, had escaped, but Sydney hadn't. Their stories, corroborated by texts and photos, showed a pattern: recruitment, control, and for Sydney, murder. The trials, held separately in Nebraska, trials began in July 2019 in Saline County. The courtroom packed with Sydney's family and supporters. Trail, now 55, was defiant, his vampire claims a bizarre sideshow. The prosecution presented the Walmart footage, the blood traces, and the women's testimonies, each piece a hammer blow. Sydney's mother, Susie, took the stand, her voice steady but raw. "She was my light," she said, clutching Sydney's necklace. "They took her for nothing." Trail, mid-trial, slashed his throat in court, a dramatic bid for sympathy that failed. On June 9, 2021, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy, sentenced to death by lethal injection, a rare penalty in Nebraska. Boswell's trial followed in October 2021. At 30, she was a shadow of her Tinder persona, her charm replaced by a blank stare. The prosecution replayed the evidence, adding Boswell's texts to Sydney, their flirtation, a chilling bait. A forensic expert detailed the hacksaw cuts, each mark a deliberate act. Mackenzie, Sydney's sister, spoke of her loss, her words cutting through the room. "She trusted you," she told Boswell, "and you betrayed her." The defense argued Boswell was Trail's victim, coerced by his dominance, but her active role, luring Sydney, buying the tools, sealed her fate. On November 8, 2021, she was convicted of murder and aiding disposal, sentenced to life without parole. The ink is not healed. Sydney's face adorns memorials, her name a reminder of digital dangers. Her family created a foundation, Sydney Smiles, funding mental health support, a nod to her quiet struggle. The Wilbur apartment was demolished, its site a vacant lot shunned by locals. Trail, on death row, awaits execution, his cult a fading myth. Boswell, in a Nebraska prison, writes letters claiming innocence, her words ignored. The shadows linger. What drove Trail and Boswell to such depravity? Was it power, thrill, or a shared darkness that fed on vulnerability? The hacksaw, now in evidence, holds no answers, only the echo of a life torn apart. Sydney's notebook, filled with recipes, sits in Susie's home, a dream that will never rise. As the rain falls outside, picture Nebraska's endless plains, their silence now heavy with loss. Sydney Loof's story is a warning. A swipe can open a door, and some doors lead to monsters. As the rain softens to a whisper, we leave these shadows behind, 9 stories of greed, obsession, and betrayal that echo in the silence. From the poisoned streets of Mendoza to the desolate plains of Nebraska, these tales reveal the fragility of trust and the darkness that festers in human hearts. Karen Oviedo's venom, Daniel Wozniak's greed, Felix Verdejo's fall, each a reminder that evil often wears a familiar face, its smile hiding a blade. If you've drifted into sleep, may your dreams be gentler than the truths we've uncovered. If you're still with us, thank you for walking these haunted paths. The rain will fade, but these stories linger, a warning etched in memory. Subscribe to Shadows of the Past, share your thoughts in the comments, and join us next time for more tales that stir the soul. Until then, stay vigilant, for the shadows are never far. Good night, and may the light keep you safe.